Robert Winters was a 78-year-old retired logger living in Oregon. Robert and his 3 sons headed off for their annual hunting trip that they would do at Sparks Lake. They know this area inside and out. They arrive at Sparks Lake and they set up their camp right at the base of this mountain, and for the first couple of days, everything was going great. They found out that there was this big snowstorm coming in later that night, so they decided they would stay at lower elevation. So the 4 of them split up and they took up different positions all around this lake, and they all hunt for the day, and then they all come back to the campsite that night. Except Robert didn't come back, and as it got darker and the snow started to fall, his sons got really worried and they went out looking for him, but quickly saw that we got to get other people involved in this because this snowstorm's coming in and we don't know where he is. So they call the sheriff's office. The sheriff's department launches this massive search right away, but unfortunately, over the first 24 hours, not only did they not find any sign of where he was, but over 18 inches of snow dumped all over the area. Because of the snowfall, it made searching the area on foot really difficult, so they called in a couple helicopters, and it was at this time that one of the helicopters picked up tracks at 7,100 feet right near the lake. And people said that can't be Robert's, because that would mean he would have had to go up almost 2,000 feet in elevation when he and his sons had all agreed we're not going to go higher because of the snow. 5 days after Robert went missing, no sign of him has been found, and the search was terminated. 9 months later, a doctor was on vacation in the same area near Sparks Lake, and he discovered next to a tree up around that area where those tracks had been found, he found a rifle, some clothes, a boot, a glove, and a pair of glasses. The doctor informed the sheriff's department, who came out and confirmed that these all belonged to Robert Winters, but oddly enough, there was no blood anywhere on the clothes. And there were no bone fragments or any remains anywhere in the area. So there was no indication that Robert had actually even died. It looked like the clothes had been removed on purpose. Everything was stacked neatly next to this tree. The only other new piece of evidence that we would ever find about him is a year later, his dentures were found in that area. The family wanted to move forward with funeral arrangements, but they needed the coroner to sign a death certificate. The coroner refused for over a year, saying there's no sign he actually died. But eventually the coroner said it's also impossible for him to be alive at this point, so they were able to get a death certificate even though there was nothing ever found of him. Dr. Catherine Wong, who was a pediatrician in San Jose, California, she was 47 years old. She and her husband John, along with 2 relatives and 2 of their 3 kids, loved to go skiing any chance they could, so Dr. Wong was actually a fairly skilled skier. The Wongs arrive, they start skiing, it's this beautiful day. At about 11:30 in the morning, everybody stops and goes into the lodge for lunch. After lunch, Dr. Wong and her husband John decide to go skiing on their own, and at some point decide to go down separate trails. John goes down his trail, and Dr. Wong will go down her trail, and she doesn't show up at the bottom. John's down at the bottom, he's waiting for her. After a little bit of time, he starts to think, okay, maybe she got hurt, maybe she fell down. He starts making his way over and looking up the trail. He can't see anything, there's no indication that someone's been hurt, and he starts looking for another 20-30 minutes, can't find her. Ski patrol goes up, and they're looking for tracks coming off of the trail, a sign that maybe someone fell off and went into the woods. But there's no tracks anywhere of somebody leaving the trail, so the ski patrol gets in touch with the sheriff's office, who come out and launch an absolutely massive search. But by the end of the day, there was no sign of Dr. Wong, and even more strangely, they had searched all 75 trails on Bear Valley Ski Resort, and there was not one indication that someone had skied off of any of the trails or even walked off any of the trails. The search continued for another 2 days, no sign of Dr. Wong. They began reviewing all of the security footage, and any instance where she was on camera, there seemed to be nothing wrong. At the end of that second day, the weather got much worse, temperatures dropped, and this huge snowstorm rolled in, and the folks in charge of the search decided it was too dangerous to continue. At this point, they told the family that they are considering Dr. Wong deceased, and they terminated the search. It was around this time that newspapers and people in the area began to speculate that this was not an accident, that either Dr. Wong willingly decided to vanish or foul play was involved. Her husband John ended up taking a lie detector test, which he passed, and investigators began digging into their marriage a bit, and it looked for all the world like it was 20 years of a very stable, healthy, happy relationship. 4 months after she went missing, her remains and ski equipment were found about a half-mile south of the ski resort in this deep ravine, heavily forested, well off any marked trail. Bone fragments and remains were scattered over a quarter-mile trail along this ravine. This area was so steep and so difficult to get to, plus there was 8-foot snowdrifts from the ski resort all the way to that area, that they decided it would have been impossible for her to get there. So how did she end up in this impossible area, and why weren't there any tracks leaving the mountain? Some say that an animal is responsible for this attack, but what kind of an animal is able to sneak up and grab a person off of a very populated ski resort and drag them this half-mile away without leaving any tracks or raising any suspicion? Corey and 2 of his friends decide to go elk hunting. Corey was not an avid hunter, but he went hunting enough that he was competent, and he had taken survival training. When they get there, they decide to split up and meet back up at the truck at 6:30 that night. The other 2 hunters came back to the truck, but not Corey. He was nowhere to be found. The other 2 hunters briefly went out looking for Corey, and they couldn't find him, so they called the sheriff's department, who comes out, and they launch this absolutely epic search. In over 10 days, that group covered 12 square miles where Corey would have been. When this all-star search team has come up with nothing, people began to wonder if the other 2 hunters had accidentally shot and killed Corey and maybe buried him. But those search dogs never found a gravesite. The sheriff's department that was in charge of this search was so perplexed by the fact that this amazing team of searchers couldn't find anything that they ended up contacting the FBI, which indicates they were suspecting foul play, because that's the only reason the FBI would get involved. But almost nothing happened in Corey's case for nearly a year. 2 hunters were hunting about 10 miles away from where Corey had gone missing, and they discover a rifle, a backpack, and a jacket. They don't know whose it is, so they turn it over to the sheriff's department. The sheriff's department comes out, and they're able to confirm that they all belonged to Corey Fay. A new search was ordered right around that area where his belongings were found. All they could find were a couple of bone fragments and his tooth. And interestingly, they also never found his pants or his boots. But now that they had some of his remains, the sheriff's department realized that to go from where he went missing to 10 miles away, 3,000 feet up in elevation to where some of his remains were found, he would have been in waist-deep snow for over 5 miles. People were skeptical about him making this trek because it didn't make sense. Corey's grandparents said in an interview that Corey had taken these survival courses that he would talk about all the time, and one of the main things they teach you is in a survival situation when you're on a mountain, you never go up. So for him to have wound up 10 miles away and 3,000 feet up in elevation is basically doing the opposite of what he was trained to do. There's no reason that in a real survival situation that he would have just thrown that out the window. He would have relied on his training. Did he defy his training and go there on his own? Or did an animal attack him and drag him there? But if it's the latter, what kind of animal drags a 17-year-old, his rifle and his backpack 10 miles up 3,000 feet of elevation in over 6 feet of snow? And where is the rest of him? All we ever found were a couple of bone fragments and a tooth. And that's gonna do it, guys. Until next time, see ya.